Hello, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. In the last video, I talked about various prophecies that Jesus had talked about in Matthew 24 and that are written in Revelation 6. And I talked about that my understanding of those events and how I saw the world slowly moving into position, and these things were happening, beginning with Israel becoming a nation and the Jewish people returning to the land of Israel. That I felt that that was a strong piece of evidence for believing in Jesus. And so right now I want to go through in this video a timeline. I'll try and keep it a little bit shorter than the other ones, but I hope that it'll be beneficial for you, and I hope that it will just help you in your studies, and as these things possibly come to fruition, that it'll help you in your faith. So in the last video I talked about the fig tree generation. This parable in Matthew 24 verse 32 to 34 called the fig tree parable, and basically that any time in the Bible that it refers to figs or fig trees in the Old Testament, it's referring to the Jewish people in the Promised Land or the Jewish people in Israel. And that Jesus talks about when this fig tree, blooms again, when it comes alive again, puts forth leaves, becomes prosperous. And we see all the things that he has listed in Matthew 24 come to pass. We know that he is near at the doors. And he says, "Assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all of these things take place." Well, all of these things in Matthew 24 begin with the parable of the fig tree, the Israel being reborn as a nation, the Jewish people returning to the Promised Land, which is mentioned in Jeremiah 24 in the Old Testament and Ezekiel 36, that God will spread them out to the four corners of the earth, and then at some point he will gather them back and give them back the land. And so we look at this, and so if that's the starting point to begin, then the generation will by no means pass away till all these things happen, including Jesus' return. So those who saw Israel reborn as a nation and saw the Jewish people return to the Promised Land, within that lifespan, that one lifespan, will see his return. Just like it took Jesus his one lifespan to fulfill all the messianic prophecies in the Old Testament, I believe that here this is one lifespan of this group of people who saw Israel become a nation will not all pass away before he returns. The charts I'm going to present to you will illustrate a possible timeline of events. This is not to be an exact timeline because I'm not God. I don't know the future. I can only study and think and watch the things that are going on in the world, and what the Bible has to say is going to happen. Try to put the pieces of the puzzle together. I know that for many people, if you've heard this topic before or didn't have done any type of study on it, there have been a lot of books, a lot of sermons, a lot of movies and stuff that have been done speculating on what the future is going to hold, and how all these things in the Bible are going to be fulfilled. And so, like I said, we've had the Left Behind series. We've had, I think there's these movies, I don't know, done in the 70s or something like that, The Thief in the Night, and those types of movies and stuff like that. And like I said, many people have speculated, but there's some rules that we need to apply, or I believe that there's well-established rules that we need to apply when we're trying to understand or trying to study this type of topic. It can be very difficult to establish some ideas and properly apply some ideas, because we have words like amillennialism, premillennialism, pre-tribulation, mid-tribulation, post-tribulation, preterism, these types of topics, or these types of terms. If you aren't familiar with these words or words like them, it's perfectly okay. They're simply terms and word concepts that have been created to express an overall worldview, and to help us to kind of narrow different things on this topic. I don't, just to be clear, I don't agree with all of them. In fact, I probably don't know if I agree with all of them 100%. But that's not neither here nor there. As I go forward, I will try to explain why and show some of the work that and study that I have, that to see what fits within the biblical framework, and why some of these ideas might be more accurate than others, but many are incomplete. Again, don't take my word for anything. Do your own research, find out for yourself, pray about it. But I think the main question is why study Bible prophecy? Why study this topic? Especially if so many people think it's vague, it's mysterious, it's foreign, it's doom and gloomy, and all that kind of stuff. Well, we need to understand that, first of all, the Bible is a prophetic book. It's estimated that almost 1/3 of the Bible contains prophecies that apply to Jesus' return and the events preceding it. As we have seen, there are over 300 prophecies that are in the Old Testament that Jesus fulfilled in his life, as I showed in my last video. The event of the second coming is estimated to have over 500 prophecies that connect to it. But beyond that, there are many other passages that were prophetic. For example, in the garden, God says to the serpent, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." This is Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. This is a prophecy that foretells the coming of the Messiah, who would have his heel bruised, and then the destruction of the serpent. When God said to Noah, "And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark, covered inside and out with pitch, and this is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it to a cubit from above, and set the door of the ark in its side. You shall make with it lower, second, and third decks, and behold, I myself am bringing flood waters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh in which is the breath of life. Everything that goes on the earth shall die, but I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you." This is Genesis 6:13-18. This was God foretelling an event that was yet to come. And the same thing with Abraham, talking to him about that he would be the father of many nations. Today we see millions of people who believe in what is known as the Abrahamic faiths, whether it be Judaism, Islam, or Christianity. There are many prophetic passages throughout the Bible, but if you're skeptic like I was, then the area that I wanted to focus on was the future. What the past prophetic passages help us with is showing us a pattern for us to apply to future prophetic passages, regardless of the various views, of which there are many on the internet and from different people and the number of prophecies involved. There are simple laws and rules that we can apply every time we study Bible prophecy. So some of the rules that I believe that are established in the Bible is Rule 1. Forget everything you think you know, have been taught, or heard. Question everything. Sometimes we are taught certain views or certain terms because of the church that we go to, because it makes us feel like that it's gonna make us more Christian, that or something like that. It does something for us. The baseline I think that's important to begin with is a simple one. Isaiah 46, 9 to 11. It says, Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things that are not yet done, saying, My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Calling a bird of prey from the east, the man who executes my counsel from a far off country. Indeed, I have spoken it. I will bring it to pass. I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it. I will also do it. God is in control, regardless of my views or yours. God will unfold the future one way, His way. I am simply going to try to piece the puzzle pieces together, but I may be totally wrong. I may be all right. I may be partially wrong or partially right. It doesn't matter. What matters is understanding and trying to understand the Bible and watching things unfold. Rule number 2, understand the Bible says in Psalm 119, 105. Your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light to my path. The Bible was written long ago, and yet we can read it over and over and over again and always learn new stuff and understand and unravel things. The Bible is not a floodlight. It's not a spotlight that lights our way for miles ahead. It is a lamp to allow us to see in front of us, but that we walk by faith. The same applies to Bible prophecy as I'll show you. Rule number 3, understanding the purpose of Bible prophecy. Bible prophecy is not for us to know the future years in advance or to predict everything accurately, but to watch the future as it becomes the present unfolding as the Bible has described. Jesus says in John 13:19, Now I tell you before it comes to pass, that when it does come to pass, you may believe that I am He. This is the essence of Bible prophecy, that the Bible has things written in it that we can read, have an idea of what things might happen or kind of an idea of what might happen, but when it comes to pass, things will be made clear, and then we can be like, oh, that's what it meant. This is exactly what it's saying, because we're seeing it happen right before our eyes, and that we might believe. This is for non-believing people. That is what the purpose of Bible prophecy is. It's not for me as a believer in Jesus to become famous or to be special or anything. It is for people who don't believe to see that the Bible has foretold these things, to see it come to pass right before their eyes, so that they might believe in Jesus. Watching prophecies that were written long ago about our time coming to pass in front of our eyes, so that we might believe. That is the essential purpose of Bible prophecy. Rule number 4. All Bible prophecy will be fulfilled literally as it is written. I know that this is a very controversial rule, because many people think that Bible prophecy is allegorical or metaphorical, and maybe it has some symbolism at times, but the Bible always defines the symbols. For example, when Jesus talked about the fig tree parable, it says, learn this. Learn what the fig tree represents. You go back into the Bible. It's easy for us to do a Google search and find out that the fig tree applies to the Jewish people being in Promised Land or in Israel. We know this because how else would a person who doesn't believe be able to read and see them fulfilled as they're written and believe if it was allegorical or metaphorical and open to all sorts of interpretations? Then it wouldn't be useful. We also know this because we believe Jesus fulfilled 300 prophecies in the Old Testament as it was written, like being born of a virgin in Bethlehem, that he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey and was pierced for our transgressions and bruised for our iniquities. We believe that he died, was buried, and rose again on the third day, literally as the Bible said that the Messiah would fulfill these things. 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4. Moreover, brethren, I declare to you the gospel which I preached to you, which you also received, and which you stand, by which also you are saved, if you hold fast that word which I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you first of all, which I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, and that he rose again on the third day according to the Scriptures. When Paul was writing this, there was no New Testament. The Scriptures he's talking about is the Old Testament. It was foretold. And Paul is saying here that these things literally happened. Christ died for our sins, according to the Scriptures. He was buried, and he rose again on the third day, according to the Scriptures, because they were fulfilled literally. And I think that that's important to look, when we look at Bible prophecy, is to understand these things will be fulfilled as they were written. Rule number 5, understand who the audience is. Who is the author speaking about? All Scripture is for the believer, but it is not all about the believer. For example, Matthew 24 is about the Jewish people. It's about Jerusalem. It's about Israel. And it's about the second coming. The chapter isn't about Christians or the event called the rapture of the church. It is for the Jewish people. It's about the history of the Jewish people and what the future events of the Jewish people, Israel, and Jerusalem will be in advance of the second coming of Jesus. Rule number 6, try to silence the noise. This topic has always been mysterious and foreign and difficult because as we get closer to the time mentioned, the lamp of God's Word shines on it, which helps us bring it into focus. There is studying and speculating as to how the pieces will fit together. There are many agreed on events, but how they all fit together is what we try to understand. We often like to use terms and phrases to encapsulate an understanding, like the ones that I mentioned before. Bible prophecy is no different, except that, and in my own opinion, many terms or phrases that are commonly used give us a preconceived idea and can leave us confused. If we hold too tightly to these terms, I think we're going to miss what the Bible is actually trying to say. Because as we get closer to the time period, I think that more of these things will become clear, and maybe some of these terms that we've held on for so many years might not be as accurate as we once thought they were. But it's important to not rely on the terms, but read what the Bible says, see what is unfolding, and see if it is a fulfillment of Scripture. So here's the first. I'm going to give these various timelines. So here's the fig tree generation. One lifespan. Matthew 24, 32-34. Within this lifespan, between these two events, all things must take place. Israel reborn as a nation, May 14th, 1948. I also threw this in there that the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, held its first session February 14th, 1949. All the way to when Jesus returns. So all of the things that are mentioned in the Bible should happen between these two events. That is the understanding. And all the things that, all the stuff I'm going to go through happen in between these two events. The reason I go through the next set of slides is to show how the Bible has made significant predictions before, and to answer the question, can we know the time of Jesus' return? Many people often quote the verse here, but no man knows the day or the hour, not even the angels in heaven, but my Father only. How do we understand this? Are we supposed to say, when somebody talks about Jesus' return and talks about studying Bible prophecy and having a conversation about, are we close? Is Jesus' return Could it be in 100 years? Could it be in 500 years? Are we even supposed to have this type of conversation? Because, and so to understand, what does this mean? I have a couple of ideas. For example, if I said to you, let's say we're friends, and I said to you, I'm going away and I'm going to be back on December 24th or 25th, I'm not really sure, somewhere in that time frame. And somebody comes and says, oh, did he tell you when he was going to be back from his trip? Would you say, well, you know what, he wasn't really specific, so I'm not really sure? No, you like you wouldn't say that. You would say, well, he said somewhere between the 24th and 25th. Not really sure. He wasn't really sure the exact time, but somewhere in between there. Okay, that what when we talk about this verse, there is a feast day. It's called the Feast of Trumpets, where it's called the feast that no one knows the day or the hour of, because it's not based on a set date of the calendar. It's based on a phase of the moon. So it's a 2-day feast, and when the sliver of the moon, when you could see the sliver of the moon, it was said that there would need to be 2 witnesses who saw the sliver of the moon, because it might be cloudy in some areas or somebody might not catch it, and they go to the priest and they would say, okay, we both saw the sliver of the moon, and the feast would start. So people didn't know the exact time or hour within those 2 days that the feast would start, but they knew it was going to start within those 2 days. I believe that this is an idiom for the Feast of Trumpets, because when you study the feast, it's interesting that there are 7 feasts in God's calendar year that he would meet with his people. Jesus fulfilled the first 3 feasts. I think it's 3. Could be 3 or 4. I always get them mixed up. And then the remaining ones are said to be fulfilled when he returns. Feast of Trumpets, Feast of Tabernacles, and I know that there's one more for sure. And so I think that this is the idiom for the Feast of Trumpets, the next feast that is to be fulfilled on Jesus' return, because it's the feast that no one knows the day or the hour of. That, again, is speculation, but it seems to fit with the history of the feast that Jesus fulfilled when he was here the first time. So can we know the date of Jesus' return? If we go to Daniel 9 and start at verse 24, it says, 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city. Who are Daniel's people? The Jewish people. Where's Daniel's holy city? In Jerusalem. Even though he was in Babylon, his holy city was Jerusalem. That was the same for every Jewish person. To finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. When we look at these events, how are the Jewish people supposed to fulfill these events? The same way that only we can. It's through Jesus. Jesus is the one who finishes the transgressions. Jesus makes an end to sin. Jesus makes reconciliation for our iniquities. Jesus brings in everlasting righteousness. Jesus seals up visions and prophecy. And we will anoint the most holy Jesus. That is how we fulfill, how this will be fulfilled by the Jewish people in this 70-week prophecy. It's that they come to know who Jesus is. That is the whole purpose of Bible prophecy. And then verse 25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem, this is the first event, until Messiah the Prince, this is the second event. Sounds like similar type of pattern from Matthew 24. There shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. 7 plus 62 is 69 weeks. The streets shall be built again, and the wall even in troublesome times. Okay, so what is happening here? So Daniel is praying. If you go through the verses before, the angel Gabriel comes to Daniel and says, Daniel, I've got a prophecy here for you. 70 weeks this prophecy is going to last, and it's going to begin from the command to restore and build Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince, which is the first and second event. And in between that time period, there should be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So that's 69 weeks. It's not 70, it's 69. And after 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. Okay. So what Gabriel is giving Daniel here is a prophecy of the history from the command to restore Jerusalem, all the way to Messiah the Prince, all the way to where the city prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Then it says, then he, a future person, shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate. This is the history of the Jewish people. So that by the end of it, Jesus will fulfill all of these things. So how do we understand this? We have to take these events. Know that from the going forth of the command to restore Jerusalem till the Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Okay. So it says here in Nehemiah 2, the command to restore and build Jerusalem. And it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, that the king said to me, what do you request? So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask you that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it. Verse 17, then I said to them, you see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lies waste, and its gates are burned with fire. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer be a reproach. And I told them of the hand of my God, which has been good upon me, and also the king's words that he had spoken to me. So they said, let us raise up and build, they that set their hands to this good work. So in Nehemiah 2, it talks about the request to build and the command to go out. Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, was 445 BC. So that is the date of the first event, command to rebuild Jerusalem. 69 weeks. If this was a literal 69 weeks, then the Jewish people would have believed that the Messiah was going to come in 445 BC, or but that's not the case. So the 69 weeks must be something different. 69 weeks from the decree to rebuild Jerusalem to Messiah is cut off or killed is not a literal 70 weeks. What we discover in the Old Testament is that there is a day to a 1 year comparison. For example, for 40 years, 1 year for each day of the 40 days you explored the land, you will suffer to know your sins and what it's like to have me against you. Numbers 14:34. So for 40 years, 1 year for each of the 40 days they explored land, because when they explored the land that God said, I'm going to give you this land, they went, some spies went out and looked ahead, saw that there were giants and things in the land that made them terrified, and they came back and they're like, no, better to go around, whatever. They gave a bad report. They're like, we're afraid here, like we don't think we can win. And so God was upset because he said, I will give you this land. So for the 40 days that they explored the land and came back with this bad report, God says, for each day, you're going to wander the desert for 40 years. And when you have completed them, and this is Ezekiel 4, chapter 4, verse 6, and when you have completed them, lie again on your right side, then you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have laid on you a day for each year. So we see here that in the Old Testament there is a connection between one day to 1 year. If we apply that same mentality, or here in Leviticus is another one. You shall count 7 Sabbath of years for yourself. 7 times 7 years. At the end of the time of the 7th Sabbath of years shall be to you 49 years. So it just shows, again, a connection between a group of years, 7 Sabbaths, or 7 days for 7 times 7, is 49 years. So Artaxerxes was the 5th king of kings in the Achaemenid Empire from 465 to 424 BC. So the 20th year, Nisan, the 20th year, would be 465 minus 20 years is 445 BC. If the 1 day is 1 year, then 1 week of days is 7 years. 70 weeks of 7 years is 490 years. 69 weeks of that 70 is 483 Hebrew years. In the book of Daniel, we see that the Hebrew calendar is based on a 360-day year. We today, and this would have been the same math, it would have been easy for the Jewish people because they would have gone by the Hebrew calendar then. So all they would have had to do is say, okay, we know when the command went out to rebuild Jerusalem, add 483 years, and we can see Messiah is cut off. That's why Jesus in Matthew 16 was rebuked the Pharisees, because they could not see him, the Messiah, standing right in front of them. They should have known. He says they should have known when he was going to appear to them. Today, though, we don't go by a 360-day year Hebrew calendar. We go by a 365.25 day Gregorian calendar year. So there's going to be a little bit of math that we need to do. So we know that the decree to rebuild Jerusalem was Nisan 445 BC, the 20th year of Artaxerxes. If we take the 360-day calendar times 483 years, we get 173,880 days. If we take 173,880 days, divide that into the 365.25 days of a Gregorian calendar, we would get 476.05 years, still in the month of Nisan. So, how does this work? From the commandment to rebuild Jerusalem, 445 BC to 1 BC, is 444 years. 476.05 minus 444 years leaves 32.05 years left. So 1 AD plus 32 years equals Nisan of 33 AD, where Messiah was killed or cut off. This leaves 1 week, the 70th week, 7 years left in this prophecy. This is the amount of time Christians believe are part of the last days. But what was interesting for me in being showed this, how I learned this, whatever it was, but seeing this was part of why I believed Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is God, because in Daniel, the book of Daniel, I think it was written in 600 years before Jesus arrived on the scene. Daniel was given this prophecy. This is a prophecy that the Jewish people in the first century, and even Jesus read from Daniel during his ministry. So it existed in the first century. They had the scrolls of the book of Daniel, and here we can see that this is referenced. Like I said, the math would have been a lot simpler in the first century. You simply take whatever the Hebrew year would have been that they knew that the decree to rebuild Jerusalem went out. You add the 483 years, boom, you would have landed at the same, whatever the Hebrew year 33 AD would have been. And they would have known this. Simple calculation. For us, like I said, because it's a switch to the Gregorian, a little bit more complex, but I hope that this makes sense, that we can see these two events described in the book of Daniel and how it came to pass. So here, the history of the 70 weeks. You've got 7 weeks, which was 49 years, the decree to rebuild Jerusalem in 445 BC, plus 49 years to build it. We have 62 weeks, 434 years between the time that they finished rebuilding it to Messiah being cut off in Nisan 33 AD. It just separates. Instead of taking the whole 69 weeks, this just shows what the 7 weeks plus the 62 weeks means, because it took them 40 years to rebuild the city of Jerusalem, and then from there 62 weeks when Jesus was crucified. Jesus was crucified, buried, rose again, and now we're in what's called the church age until the church age is over. So when we get back to the generation between Israel becoming a nation, May 14th, 1948, to Jesus returns, here's a little bit about what I think is going to happen. So we come up to the present, which is today, June 16th, 2021. I put the idea of the rapture here because I'm not setting a date. I think it could happen between any time today and when the covenant for the 7 years is signed. I'm not setting a date or setting a time. This will probably make a little bit more sense if you look at the article that I'll go through. But September 2022, why I think that is. So in between here, I think between now and September 22, I think is a possible time for the rapture to happen, where millions of Christians are called to heaven, but in between now and then, seals of Revelation 6, 1-6, I think will unfold. Then we have the third temple being rebuilt after the covenant of 7 years is signed. The covenant is an agreement between Israel and nations of the earth that's spoken of in Daniel, going back, where it says here, and then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week or 7 years, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. So here, to me, to bring an end to sacrifice and offering, you have to have a temple. You have to have a place for those sacrifices and offerings to happen. And I believe that when Jesus refers to this in Matthew 24, and it talks about the holy place, that it's talking about the temple. So there has to be a temple for them having sacrifices and offerings for this person who will confirm this covenant with many for 7 years to end the sacrifices and offering. And again, remember, the 7 years is based on a Hebrew calendar. I think that's important. But then in the middle of the week, so the 3.5 years, which is half of 7 years, he should bring an end to sacrifice and offering. So I hope this is making sense. So when we look at this, this is 7 years. So from the signing of the covenant is 7 years until Jesus returns. In between 3.5 years, this, what the Bible calls the Antichrist, this person that Daniel is referring to, will defile this temple. This is also the time that Revelation talks about the famous mark of the beast will be issued. So the first 3.5 years, if you take a Hebrew calendar, will be 1,260 days. Last half will be 42 months, and I believe it's 1,290 days, and there's a whole study on that. But this gives you an idea. So 7 years till Jesus returns from the signing of this covenant. I think the covenant might be signed before or around September 2022. And like I said, the rapture could happen any time between now and the signing of the covenant. So things I think that might happen or be significant. Again, I have no idea about the amount of time between the present and the rapture. Could be right, like today, could be months from now it could, but we've got a present. So here now, I'm doing this video a little bit late, so it's June 16th, 2021 is the current. We've just seen the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The U.S. report said that there's no evidence for UFOs, but there's still a lot of talk about do UFOs exist and stuff like that. That may become more pertinent. I wonder if universal basic income will become permanent in North America. Why this is important is because I think that when it talks about the destruction of a currency, I think that this might be the last step that destroys our currencies if this becomes a permanent government stimulus check for everybody in the countries. I think that'll completely deteriorate the different currencies. We're seeing inflation, and the money supply is growing, and I don't believe it's transitory. I think that prices are going to skyrocket, and like I said, if UBI becomes permanent, I think then it's just going to completely destroy the currency. There's an event called the Great Reset being rolled out by the World Economic Forum. I believe it's simply a transition between ownership and renting, and it's about transitioning from paper currency to a digital currency. Because then in a digital currency, it's harder to keep track of the deterioration of a currency. And I know this is becoming a little bit technical financially speaking, but China, its allies are separating from the U.S. dollar. They're distancing itself from the U.S. dollar and not using it amongst the nations as the reserve currency. And then I think war between China and the U.S. becomes inevitable. These are events that I think could play into a narrative that will be shared and be debated over and argued over as things progress towards the rapture. Again, I could be totally wrong, but I see these things becoming some key storylines as we go forward. The Israel-Palestinian conflict may see a brief ceasefire, but I don't believe it will last. I think Israel will be engaged by the Iranian proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, and be forced to defend itself. I believe that forcing of the defending of itself will create more political tension worldwide and more criticism by nations. And I think that, but eventually I think Israel will be engaged in a war called the Psalm 83 war, where the countries immediately surrounding area, controlled by Muslim Brotherhood, Hezbollah, Hamas, and those type of nations where they reside, will be involved in this war. And again, I think that the Israel, because of its military strength, I think will be highly criticized for engaging these countries, even though I believe that it's going to be in a situation of defense. I think the military report of the UFOs might lead to some sort of deception, either that people believe extraterrestrials or explanation for the rapture. Because millions of people disappeared. That, again, I can admit that this is seems like a far-fetched belief. All of a sudden, well, we're here and then we're gone. I get that. Nothing like that has ever happened that we this isn't a common this wouldn't be a common occurrence. But if it does happen, and I believe that when I read and I study this topic and how all the things are happening, even though that this might be a far-fetched concept to many people listening, to me, I have to take it on faith that this type of event is going to happen because of so many of the other things that we're seeing happening. Just because this isn't a standard event doesn't mean that we should minimize it or we should think differently about it, because if this is going to happen as a literal event, then God can make that happen if he so chooses. So I think that there has to be some sort of explanation. If people all of a sudden disappeared, whether it be some sort of weapon, whether it be some sort of of like I said, abduction by extraterrestrials. Just, I wonder if this type of idea might, you blame it on UFOs, extraterrestrials, might be part of some sort of explanation. UBI and the Great Reset is a way for the elites to buy assets while devaluing and destroying global currencies and replacing them with a digital system. When the new currency is reset with gold and the backing of it, it'll make those who hold physical gold very wealthy. Nations and elites and the assets where they hold actual assets. I'm hearing about various companies both in Canada and the US who are going to buy. There's one company who's going to buy 4,000 homes across the company and change them from uh, like single family homes to rentals. I just read it today. Another company I think in the US is doing the same thing. There's some companies who are buying massive amounts of real estate right now, um, so that when the whole system is reset, um, they might come out very wealthy. And then the people who won't be able to buy those homes will have to rent them. The US dollar, I believe, will collapse as other nations around the world back away from it. The debt that the US has accumulated and will accumulate is unsustainable and weakens the currency and the nation. Um, and I believe that this devaluation of the currency and destruction of the US dollar, and just the infighting and the division and the weakness of the current administration in the White House, I think China, its allies, Russia, North Korea, Iran, etc., will take advantage of this weakness. Because China does not want to be second fiddle. I believe that they believe that they can take over, and if they can if they can get their allies to defeat the U.S., then who is strong enough to defend themselves? I don't think Europe is. Canada sure isn't. Many other countries. If you can neutralize the U.S., I think that's a game changer for the world. Um, so in between the rapture and the covenant with many for 7 years, a lot of people are speculating that there will be a gap between these two events. What might happen in the gap of time? Well, we know that there in Revelation 6 that there will be wars on earth. That's seal 2. Global economic collapse due to hyperinflation. Seal 3. Mass death from famine, disease. And seal 4. Worldwide killing of where it says worldwide killing of Christians is seal 5. Pardon me. Seal 4 is mass death from famine, disease, but also war. I forgot to put also war. Worldwide killing of Christians, seal 5, and I think seal 6 is the Gog-Magog war. At the Gog-Magog war, God defends Israel, and the world sees that the God of Israel is alive and well. Israel expands its territory, and I think the calendar changes from Gregorian to the Hebrew one. And the false Messiah, aka Antichrist, will facilitate the 7-year peace treaty. So let's just look at this. So I think that the rapture could happen anywhere between here and seal 6. I will go into why, and I'll break down each of these in subsequent videos. I just want to give you the timeline. But let's assume right now that the rapture will happen before seal 1. Well, the seal 1 in Revelation 6 talks about a rider on a white horse. When you compare that passage, Revelation 6 verses 1 to 2 and Revelation 19 verse 11, when Jesus comes back, you can see that they both ride a white horse. This rider on the white horse in Revelation 6 is given a crown of thorns, or crown, pardon me, is given a crown, and Jesus wears multiple crowns. It says that the rider in Revelation 6 carries a bow, but no arrow. In Revelation 19, Jesus has a flaming sword coming out of his mouth to judge the nations. And so there's similarities, but there are also differences. And so I think that it's alluding to an impostor, a false Messiah. So when Jesus talks about here in Matthew 24, it says here, "Then if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'there,' Do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, even if possible, even the elect. See, I've told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, Look, he is in the desert, do not go out, or Look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. And then he says, For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes from to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. So he's making a distinction here between his return and a false prophet and a false Christ, who can do signs and wonders. And so, to me, when you compare these descriptions, I think that the first seal, will be a false Messiah that is revealed, that the Jewish people will believe that their Messiah has finally come, because we know that they don't accept Jesus as their Messiah. They don't believe that their Messiah has already come. They're still waiting for him, and even now, believe that he is here and he'll soon be revealed. And I think that'll be the first seal. Second seal, I think this may happen in different stages. Seal 2 could be China, Russia attack and invade the US. That could be seal 2, but I'm more and more that I think of it, I think what's going to happen is, what if China attacks, say, Taiwan, and Russia, say, attacked Ukraine or Crimea, or some other nation, and then the US is forced to intervene. Israel has wars with surrounding nations, Psalm 83 war that I talked about. Then I think that as there are wars, smaller wars happening around the world, and violence, and people becoming fearful, people becoming angry, there's division and all this kind of stuff, that we see a global economic collapse via hyperinflation, and that unrest, that where seal 2 says the peace will leave the earth in Revelation 6 verses 3 and 4. I wonder if maybe because prices have become too extravagant, they become uneasy, and there's anger about all of this, and then we see the collapse happen. Then seals 4, as China, I think then this conflict could grow into a world war, because seal 4 talks about, just give me a second here. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard a voice of the fourth living creature saying, Come and see. So I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over a fourth of the earth, to kill with sword, with hunger, and with death, and by beasts of the earth. I wonder if this is referring to a world war. Or does it mean 1/4 of the earth? But I think it's his power over a fourth of the earth, to kill with sword, or with war, with hunger, with death, and the beasts of the earth. So that's why I think there could be a third world war here. It covers the earth, and then if China wins, and Iran, and those allies, then I think that seal 5, where believers worldwide are killed. Then seal 6, I think, is where Russia and Iran, Turkey, and other nations march towards Israel to steal their treasures, called the Gog and Magog war. God shows himself. This is found in Ezekiel 38. God rescues Israel, destroys these nations. Everybody sees that God exists, that the God of Israel is real, and he has saved Israel. And then I think that this false Messiah then appears on the world stage again, and signs a peace treaty with many nations for 7 years, and then begins the last 7 years of human history. So if we take this in the first 1260 days, so the signed peace treaty with many nations, first 7 years, begins it. I believe that this will be a time of peace and prosperity around the world, because after it's been war-torn and everything has collapsed, I think that this false Messiah, this Savior, will bring peace and prosperity, and Israel will think that they've entered the golden age. under the Messiah, which will soon turn out to be the greatest mass murderer in history. The reason being is that the Antichrist, this person who is come in place of Christ, is not from God. He will be allowed to do certain things, do signs and wonders, but he is a deceiver. He is an imposter. He is a fake. And he wants to, in the end, destroy humanity. He wants to destroy Israel and the Jewish people, and he wants to destroy and get us to destroy ourselves. He is of Satan, of the kingdom of darkness. So I think that after the 1260 days, what Revelation 11 talks about is that God says, I send my 2 witnesses to prophesy for 1260 days, and then after that they are killed. What it talks about in Revelation 11 is that they are invincible. Those who come and hurt them, it says, will be hurt in the same manner. They're invincible for 1260 days. They cannot be killed. But then, after the 1260 days, this Antichrist, this false Messiah, will kill them. And he will suffer a head wound. He will survive, so he will kill the 2 witnesses of God. He will suffer a head wound and survive, showing some sort of, invincibility. He will stand in the temple of God and declare that he is God, and God will not smite him. And then he mark some sort of something, I'm not going to speculate on what it is, will be issued that everyone who is to worship this figure, this Antichrist, something will be given to people to where that the government that the Antichrist has set up can monitor their bank accounts if they don't take it, and cut off the flow of currency so that they cannot buy or sell anything. Then from then on, it'll be the final 42 months or 3.5 years where hell on earth will break out. The Jews will flee and hide as this Antichrist stands in the temple and defiles it. And then the march toward Armageddon begins, where Jesus will return and destroy this Antichrist, this beast, and his armies. And so that is kind of the... And you notice that this is more vague. This 7 years is, yes, we can see some events. We have a little bit of a timeline, but it's very vague. What I've tried to do is not speculate on what the mark is or all these types of things. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to talk about what we can see. These events we can see happening are on the horizon. We can see that there are things that are happening now, at this point, right, in this time that we're talking about, right, all these things are very current. And so I'm trying to just present some ideas, but here's one thing I do want to show you, what I think is very interesting, to kick all these off. We know that the Jewish people don't believe Jesus is the Messiah. On October 15, 2020, here in Israel Today, it says Israeli rabbi says he's already holding meetings with Messiah. A snapshot of Israel's spiritual hunger as biggest rabbis are afraid to leave the country lest they miss Messiah's coming. We have in Israel 365 News on August 23rd, 2020, prominent rabbi breaks silence. Messiah is coming this year. So in Israel, they have Rosh Hashanah. It's, I think, roughly around September. And so that's when their new year is. So when he said, this rabbi says Messiah is coming this year, he's not talking about in 2020. He's talking about from September 2020 to September 2021. So it says here that that Rabbi Shalom Arush, an Israel Breslov rabbi and founder of this institution, made an entirely uncharacteristic announcement. On September 18th, Jews will be celebrating the last New Year without the Messiah. So he's talking this, like I said, this was in August 23rd, 2020. So on September 18th, 2020, Jews will be celebrating the last year without Messiah. I'm going to tell you with certainty that Hashem, God, literally the name, will help us meet together after Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Rusin into last week. And remember well what I'm telling you, that this Rosh Hashanah, that one that happened September 18th, 2020, will be the last one without Mashiach, Messiah. And it could be very well beyond that, on this Rosh Hashanah, that Messiah is revealed. So we went by September 18th, 2020. This Messiah was not revealed, but there he's saying that before Rosh Hashanah 2021, that this Messiah will be revealed. Excuse me. When you look at July 21st, 2020, Israel 365 News, Israeli rabbi reveals date of Messiah's arrival according to Kabbalah. So this one I found interesting, even though it was a little bit earlier than the other one. I found this one interesting because it talks about this. Let me just see here. Sorry. So this rabbi here, Rabbi Daniel Asor, says that from September 2020 to September 2021, a one world government ruling the world, will be in place for the 9 months the New World Order rules. There's many people who look at this term New World Order. They talk about globalists. We talk about places like or things like the World Economic Forum or the International Monetary Fund, those kind of things. But it's kind of a globalist kind of agenda. And what's interesting is one of the biggest World Economic Forum events that they're talking about is the Great Reset. I encourage you to do some research on that. But I think that that's what this could apply. But what this rabbi is saying is that between September 2021, September 2022 is a year of Jubilee. On Yom Kippur 2021, which Yom Kippur 2021 falls on the night of September 15th or the night of September 16th, 2021, the Messiah will reveal himself and then disappear. So it's interesting here that you have these rabbis who are saying Messiah is here. He's going to reveal himself. Then you have these two rabbis in 2020 say that by September 2021 that this Messiah will reveal. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I'm not saying that I have no idea. I'm just saying that it's interesting that when Jesus talked about that in John that he came in his Father's name, but there would be one who come in his own name, that they would receive him. And that he talks about in Matthew 24 a false Messiah, a Christ that will seek to replace him as Messiah, that to warn against, and that in the generation, in the lifespan of Israel becoming a nation, here these rabbis are saying that their Messiah is here, that he's going to reveal himself by September 2021. And then he's going to disappear. The rabbi said that he will reemerge again in Yom Kippur 2022, which falls on October 4th to 5th. And then on Yom Kippur, it talks about Moses brought the Torah down from Sinai. In the desert we receive the Torah, and in the desert we will receive Messiah. Look at Matthew 25. Look, therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out, or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. So it's, again, just very interesting that they use the desert, that Jesus talked about, if they say he's in the desert, don't receive him, and here in the desert we will receive Messiah. And so what the Jewish rabbi here is talking about is that when this Messiah reemerges, Yom Kippur 2022, it'll be the fulfillment of they'll take them into the let me just see here. Final redemption. So between Yom Kippur 2022 to 2023, the Messiah will make his second appearance, and we will see the final redemption. Again, I find this very interesting because for so many years we heard of that the Jewish people believed in two messiahs. Now maybe there's different sects. I apologize. I'm not an expert, but I'd always heard that the Jewish people believed that there was going to be a Messiah ben Joseph and then Messiah ben David. There are going to be two messiahs that one will come after the other, and then the Messiah ben David was going to be the actual Messiah. The Messiah ben Joseph was kind of one to prepare the way. But here it's interesting that this rabbi is saying that this Messiah, one person, will make two appearances, and then the second appearance they will see the final redemption. At Yom Kippur 2021, or it's pardon me 2022. And so again, this will just be very interesting that if this is the first seal that is broken, for the in Revelation 6 to begin the time period leading up to Jesus' return to rule and reign on the earth in Revelation 19, that we have rabbis here who are saying that they believe the Messiah is here and then it will be revealed by September of 2021, which is a few months away. So it'd just be very interesting. Like I said, I'm not saying that this is for sure. I'm not saying that it's just I find it very interesting that it ties together with what Jesus talked about in Matthew 24, and in Revelation 6. So, like I said, I'll just leave it at that. I just want to kind of go through that, and we'll see where we happen to be in September. But these are the things that I think, and like I said, I'll go into more about this in the subsequent videos. But I want to give this first seal just why I think I said that the whole 2022 here for the for the 7-year combined, because the rabbi is saying that this would be the second appearance of that Messiah, and to lead them into the redemption. And like I said, for the first 3.5 years, I believe that it will be peace and prosperity after the wars and everything has collapsed, during the 6 seals. But then these things will happen at the halfway mark, and then the final 3.5 years will be terrible for those on the earth. And that's why Jesus returns, because in Matthew 24 Jesus says, so here it talks about the abomination of desolation, this person, this Antichrist, standing in the temple and defiling it. Then it says, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are on the housetop not go down to take anything out of the house, and let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babies in those days. And I pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, nor shall ever be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. And so to me, when it talks about this period of time after the holy places had this abomination take place, which is here at the halfway, where the Antichrist defiles the third temple, that then the great tribulation, the days that the world has never seen before, happen here, and that before humanity is completely wiped out, Jesus will return, save and restore humanity and restore the earth. And so I thank you so much for listening. I hope this has been informative, and I hope to continue to talk about the things that I think might happen as we approach the day for Jesus to return and take the believers home, and then for his ultimate return to restore humanity and restore the earth. So thank you so much. God bless.